The chamber of the Galactic Empires shimmered with gold-veined obsidian, its domed ceiling aglow with constellations carved from stardust. Delegates from 100 worlds sat in tiered circles, their bodies swathed in ceremonial robes or encased in biomechanical armor, their languages translated by neural implants and psionic crystals. At the center stood the High Throne, a coiled mass of glowing tendrils belonging to Archon Virex, Emperor of the Kalari Dominion, one of the oldest and most feared of the empires. His voice rumbled like tectonic plates grinding beneath an ocean. "Let the record show," he said, every syllable reverberating through the air like a drumbeat, "that the species designated Homo sapiens remains a non-militarized, conflict-averse race with no standing war record. Their pacifism is not a virtue, but a flaw. They are, by all measurable standards, cowards." Laughter echoed, some guttural, some high-pitched, others metallic. The sworn hive emitted a series of clicks and phenomenal bursts that translated as amusement. Even the stoic Varkari consensus, cybernetic beings who rarely spoke, flickered their optic nodes in silent agreement. At the edge of the chamber, in a seat deliberately smaller and lower than the others, Ambassador Elijah Rourke of Earth sat with a tight jaw and unreadable expression. His suit, though diplomatic standard, lacked the embellishments of power favored by the others. He was a thin man, not particularly tall or physically intimidating, but his eyes held an intense stillness, like someone who'd watched something burn for too long. "If we are cowards," Rourke said, standing slowly, "why do you keep inviting us here?" The laughter stopped, but only for a moment. Virex leaned forward, his tendrils writhing lazily. "Because every empire needs jesters. Even primitive worlds can entertain." A low growl came from the Baltoran representative, a four-armed warrior named Jorik. He turned his head toward Rourke, baring serrated teeth. "Cannon fodder. Perhaps it is time the Earthlings prove themselves." A conflict brews on the outer rim. The mining colony of Velis 7 has fallen to insurgents. Perhaps the humans wish to test their courage there? Several others murmured in agreement. The suggestion, clearly a trap cloaked as diplomacy, settled like a weight in the room. Rourke's lips tightened. "We don't engage in colonial suppression. It's not our war." Virex clicked in mock disappointment. "So it is true. Even your voice quivers." The insult hung heavy. Rourke could feel the heat of shame creeping into his veins, but he didn't let it rise to his face. He looked around, not pleading, not defiant, just calculating. The Empire's expected posturing. They wanted pride, vanity, empty threats. Rourke gave him none. "Velis 7, he said quietly. "How many insurgents?" Jorah chuckled. "Several thousand. Armed. Ruthless. They've taken down 2 battalions of Kalari and 1 Qatari siege ship." "And what are you offering us for this test?" Rourke asked. "Nothing," Virex said flatly. "But perhaps, if Earth sends someone and they do not die within an hour, we'll reconsider your species' place among us." Rourke's gazed in flinch. "Fine, we'll send someone." Laughter returned, but this time it felt uneasy. The Empires had pushed too far, expecting the humans to withdraw. But Rourke's calm acceptance had landed like a blade. A communication signal pulsed in Rourke's implant. EarthGov's secure channel. Authorization accepted. Candidate confirmed. Dispatch underway. He left the chamber without another word. Back on Earth, beneath a sky of low-gray clouds and the wind-torn edges of a northern range, James Reeves stood in silence beside a gravestone. No name marked the stone, only the symbol of a trident with wings etched in black steel. He didn't flinch when the drone landed nearby, nor when it projected the holographic seal of EarthGov's Black Operations Directorate. "Mr. Reeve," the voice said, "you've been requested." He didn't look at it. "You know I retired." "We do. I buried my last team 5 years ago." "We know." Silence stretched. "They think we're cowards," the voice said. Reeve turned, his eyes, pale and sharp like Arctic glass, locked with the projection. "They're not entirely wrong. Will you go?" He looked back at the gravestone. "What's the mission?" "One colony. Thousands of armed hostiles. You're going in alone. They know that." "No." Reeve exhaled. Not a sigh, just a slow reset of his breath. Good. 3 days later, the Empires received confirmation. A single human operative had arrived on Velis 7. No fleet, no strike team, no orbital bombardment. Just one. In the observation wing aboard the orbiting Kalori dreadnought Virex's Judgment. A collection of elite alien commanders, scientists, and tacticians watched the feed from the colony below. Static occasionally blurred the screen, interference from the local weather systems, or deliberate jamming. A Varkari technician recalibrated the signal, clearly annoyed. "This is absurd," muttered Commander Thyrex of the Svorin, a sleek mantis-shaped being with obsidian armor plates. "What is one flesh-and-bone creature supposed to do against entrenched forces? This is their sacrifice, nothing more. Or perhaps this is their myth-making," sneered a Qatari general. "Send one. Make a legend of failure. Martyrdom sells well." "Perhaps," Virex said, entering the chamber. "But let us watch. I'm curious what kind of fool walks in a fire without a shield." On Velis 7, Reeve crouched beneath the blackened husk of a mining vehicle, his hands moving silently across a tactical wristband. Data flowed into his retinal HUD, heat signatures, building schematics, enemy chatter in alien tongues. His rifle, matte black and carbon-forged, lay cradled against his chest like a trusted old friend. No insignia marked his armor, but the knife strapped to his thigh bore 3 engraved initials, Devgru. The colony was a maze of narrow corridors, overhead pipelines, collapsed scaffolding, and makeshift barricades. The insurgents had turned it into a fortress. Reeve didn't blink. He didn't speak. He watched. In a control room half a mile away, the rebel commander, a hulking crimson-skinned mercenary named Karash, monitored local sensors. "There is a human on the surface," hissed one of his lieutenants. "Just one." Karash's tusked mouth split into a sneer. "Then he is already dead." In a ruined control tower, Reeve marked his first target, a comms relay guarded by 3 aliens smoking and laughing, their weapons slung lazily. They died before they knew they were under attack. Reeve's shots were silent, clean, surgical. He rigged the relay with a black box virus, one that would echo false signals and create the illusion of multiple hostiles moving through different quadrants. By the time the rebels scrambled to respond, they were chasing ghosts. In the observation wing above, silence had overtaken the watchers. "Where is he now?" asked Thyrex. The technician hesitated. "We aren't sure." "How do you lose visual on one man?" the Qatari general barked. "He's not broadcasting," the technician whispered. "He disabled their entire comm net." "Impossible," someone murmured. But it wasn't. On Velis 7, James Reeve moved like a shadow between the ruins, unseen but always watching. Each step measured, every breath controlled. He wasn't fast. He wasn't flashy. He was something far more terrifying. Deliberate. In 1 hour, 5 outposts fell. 87 hostiles were dead. None had fired a shot in defense. In the dreadnought above, Virex sat in still silence. His eyes, cold and calculating, focused on the flickering reports. "This is not a coward," he said. No one dared to argue. James Reeve sat on the edge of the drop shuttle, the walls humming with energy as it cut through the upper atmosphere of Velis 7. The dim red interior lighting cast long shadows across his face, emphasizing the hard lines and old scars that mapped his features like forgotten battlefields. His eyes, pale and unblinking, stared at the metal floor, but his mind was elsewhere, calculating routes, entry points, kill zones. The silence inside the cabin wasn't tense. It was expectant, like the moment before a trigger is pulled. There were no pilots aboard. The shuttle was automated, programmed for a single insertion point, a crumbling access tunnel in the industrial district of the colony. The moment it landed, it would self-destruct, erasing all trace of entry. James carried no ID, no insignia, and no backup. He wore matte black armor laced with active camouflage tech, its surface absorbing ambient light like a void. His weapons were stripped down to essentials: a suppressed kinetic rifle, a short-barreled sidearm, a combat knife, and a pouch of compact explosives. Nothing flashy. Everything effective. The mission parameters had been clear. No contact with Empire forces. No support. Complete disruption of the insurgent force occupying Velis 7. The assignment wasn't about diplomacy. It was a message. James had been briefed, of course. The alien warbands occupying the colony were former mercenaries turned separatists, equipped with scavenged weaponry and bolstered by local sympathizers. Their numbers were uncertain. Estimates range from 1,500 to over 2,000. Well-armed, familiar with the terrain, ruthless. They had already repelled elite units from multiple empires. None of that mattered. The shuttle jolted once, hard, as it slammed into the landing corridor. The bay door hissed open. James rose in a single motion, rifle already in hand. He stepped into the ash-choked air of Velis 7 without hesitation. The colony was quiet, eerily so. Rusted towers loomed above like skeletal fingers. A sickly orange haze stained the sky, the byproduct of corrupted filtration systems. Wind whistled through broken infrastructure. The hum of energy weapons and guttural alien voices in the distance confirmed what James already knew. He was surrounded. That was the idea. He moved quickly, slipping through broken corridors and ventilation shafts, bypassing sensor arrays and scout drones with precise, practiced ease. In another life, he would have been hunting insurgents in sand-blown cities or Arctic outposts. The terrain changed. The job didn't. At his first target, a makeshift communications hub built into a mining silo, James knelt behind a collapsed pipe and studied his prey. 5 guards. Lax posture. Poor fields of fire. Predictable patrol routes. He moved like a whisper, crossing 20 meters of open ground in seconds. The first died with a knife to the neck. The second dropped before he hit the ground, a suppressed shot punching through his thorax. The rest never saw him coming. Inside the hub, he planted a data spike in their relay system. Within moments, their entire local network was corrupted. He rerouted motion sensors to ghost signals, looped their surveillance feeds, and activated false voice comms echoing from distant sectors. He didn't need to outnumber them. He needed them confused. Across the colony, alien insurgents began receiving erratic data. Sightings of multiple humans. Phantom movement. Fluctuating vitals. Orders were shouted. Squads scrambled. And panic seeped through their ranks like oil through sand. James used the chaos as cover. He struck again at an armory, placing thermite charges on fuel cells and ammunition stockpiles. The resulting explosion lit up the southern ridge, incinerating 3 adjacent buildings and rupturing the power grid. In the observation room aboard Virex's judgment, the gathered Empire officials watched the feed in growing unease. "He's not following conventional tactics," one of the analysts said, voice low with disbelief. "No," Commander Virex muttered, "he's hunting." Back on the surface, James picked through the debris of a collapsed corridor, bypassing electrified debris and avoiding trip mines with surgical precision. He didn't speak. He didn't celebrate. Each takedown was methodical, each step measured. There was no rage in his movements, no vengeance. Just clarity of purpose. Every motion served a function. No wasted energy. By the 6th hour, he had taken out 17 critical locations. Power relays, comms nodes, ammunition caches. Always fast, always silent. Survivors began muttering about a ghost soldier, something that moved without sound, killed without warning. Fear began to take root, subtle but spreading. James found a moment to rest inside a shattered supply room, wedged between steel crates. He checked his vitals. Elevated heart rate, minor laceration on his left arm, hydration within acceptable limits. He closed his eyes briefly, allowing his body to recalibrate. He didn't need sleep. He needed silence. Memories flickered behind closed eyelids. The heat of Hellman Province. The snowfields of Nova Europa. The screams of teammates lost to time. He had survived missions that weren't meant to be survived. He wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the fastest. But he was something else. He never stopped. Movement outside pulled him from thought. He rose soundlessly and peered through a crack in the wall. A patrol, 7 insurgents, were combing the area with handheld scanners and plasma carbines. He counted steps, anticipated angles, and moved. When the last of them hit the floor, James was already gone. Up in orbit, Virex stared at the latest casualty reports. Hundreds dead, dozens of positions lost, no captured enemy, no recorded visuals, just wreckage and silence. "This is not possible," Virex said. "He's just a human," another commander added, uncertain. Virex didn't respond. Deep in his mind, something ancient stirred. Not fear, but a cousin to it. A realization. They had underestimated something they didn't understand. Elsewhere, the rebel leader, Karash, paced within his command center. His eyes, slit-pupilled and bright gold, burned with fury. His lieutenants had no answers, only excuses. "He strikes and vanishes," one of them muttered. "He fights like no creature I've ever seen." Karash slammed his fist into the steel table, denting it. "Then bait him, draw him into the open, make him feel death close." A plan was hatched. A hostage, a captured local engineer, was chained in the refinery plaza, surrounded by over 30 well-armed insurgents. A message was broadcast on every open frequency. "Come save him, human, if you have the courage." James heard it while perched above a ventilation tower half a mile away. He didn't move immediately. Instead, he studied the area. Sniper roosts, mine layers, choke points. They expected him to go straight in. He never did what they expected. At the 74th minute, the central power grid failed without warning. Darkness fell across the plaza. Seconds later, explosions erupted at the north perimeter, drawing half the guards away. Then came smoke, thick, noxious, and disorienting, flooding the plaza. In the confusion, shadows moved. By the time the lights returned, the hostage was gone. So were 15 insurgents. No alarms had triggered. No one saw him. Karash stood in the center of the ruined plaza, his weapon clenched, breath ragged. "What is he?" he whispered. The answer came from one of his lieutenants, trembling. "He's not a soldier. He's a message." And it was spreading. The story of the human spread like smoke through the rebel ranks, whispered in 5 different languages, encoded in nervous glances and unfinished sentences. They didn't have a name for him. No one had seen his face. Some claimed he wasn't human at all, but a forgotten bioweapon left buried in Earth's war vaults. Others swore they'd heard his voice on the comms, calm and deliberate, just before their entire unit vanished. Whatever they believed, it didn't matter. Fear was doing the work for him. Karash stood alone in the ruined observatory of Velis VII's central spire, his 4-clawed hands gripping the railing so tightly the metal bent. The wind howled through shattered windows. Below him, his remaining troops scurried like ants, reinforcing barriers, doubling patrols, fortifying bunkers. It was all ritual, the kind of desperate preparation people made not because it would work, but because doing nothing was worse. "He's one man," Karash growled, eyes scanning the fractured skyline. One man. His second in command, Vel Kir, stepped forward cautiously. Her body armor was scorched from a recent blast, and she limped from shrapnel wound. One man who's dismantled 3 sectors in 2 days. "We've lost communications, fuel stockpiles, 3 high-value officers, and the western gate." "He's mortal. So are the others." Karash turned slowly, his massive frame casting a shadow that swallowed hers. "He bleeds." Vel Kir hesitated. None of the survivors saw him long enough to know. Silence filled the chamber. Karash's rage wasn't loud anymore. It had condensed into something colder, heavier. "Then we make him bleed." Elsewhere, deep in the understructure of the colony, James Reeve leaned against the damp bulkhead of a power conduit tunnel, stitching a fresh gash in his side. He hadn't cried out when it happened, hadn't even paused. The plasma round had grazed him close enough to burn, but not deep enough to slow him down. His hands were steady as he tied off the final knot, sliced the thread, and rechecked his weapon. He didn't have time for pain. Pain was background noise. His HUD blinked with low power warnings. Ammunition at 28%. Supplies dwindling. That wasn't new. He'd operated on less. What concerned him wasn't the numbers. It was the shift in behavior. The enemy had stopped running. They were trying to trap him now. That was good. It meant they were afraid. Fear made people predictable. A scuttling sound echoed down the tunnel. James dropped to one knee, rifle raised. A recon drone zipped into view, scanning in infrared. He let it pass, then activated a small EMP slug and fired it clean into its belly. Sparks danced. The drone fell like a dying firefly. He didn't linger. Every kill counted, not just tactically but psychologically. He was crafting an illusion, not of a man, but of inevitability. That was the real mission. The message wasn't we are strong. It was we are patient, and when we come, you will not see us until it's too late. In the Kolari dreadnought orbiting above, the observation chamber was no longer filled with mockery or speculation. The Empire delegates watched in grim silence as footage played in grainy static. Burned-out compounds, empty barracks, unfinished meals abandoned mid-bite. One Empire general, older than most moons, leaned back in his chair and whispered, "I haven't seen fear like this since the Hive Wars." Archon Virex watched without expression. His tendrils writhed subtly as data streamed through his neural interface. "Is it true," he asked, "that Earth has thousands of these?" The Ketari envoy snorted. "They wouldn't waste one on us if they had thousands." But even he didn't believe that. Velkir moved through the central barracks, eyes sweeping every shadow. The troops didn't salute her. Discipline had eroded days ago. She saw it in the way they gripped their weapons too tightly, stared too long at corridors, flinched at every power flicker. Morale wasn't low. It was rotting. She entered the command chamber to find Karash surrounded by a tactical map, projection filters showing dozens of predicted movements. All wrong. James Reeves' attack pattern didn't follow linear logic. It was as if he knew what they were thinking before they even deployed, like he was already inside the decision-making process. "He's changing tactics," she said without preamble. Karash didn't look up. "Because we are." "He's not reacting. He's leading." Karash slammed a claw into the projection table. "Enough." Vel, Kir stared at him. "We are past pride. He is winning. He is alone." She didn't reply. Instead, she pointed to the map. "He's moving toward the gravity well station. If he disables it, we can't launch. We can't flee." Karash's snarl twisted into a grin. "Then we let him come. And this time, we won't wait in the dark." They laid their trap with ruthless efficiency. 3 corridors rigged with pressure mines. Automated turrets installed on hidden mounts. A perimeter of cloaked snipers positioned to triangulate fire. In the center of it all, Karash waited behind a reinforced blast door, clutching a plasma cannon the size of a small vehicle. They waited for hours. Then the lights died. The power didn't cut out. It evaporated. Everything went still. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The first mine detonated. Then another. A scream. Gunfire. Then nothing. Velkir tried to re-establish visuals, but saw only flickering static. The comms buzzed with fragments of breath, gunfire, silence. One sniper's feed showed only a dark corridor. Then a flash. Then nothing. By the time Karash activated the failsafe to trigger the internal lockdown, the blast door opened, not from the outside, but from within. James Reeves stood in the smoke, half his face streaked with blood, rifle low and spent. His left arm hung at his side, useless. His armor was shredded across the chest, exposing the hard muscle beneath. And yet, he didn't stagger. He didn't hesitate. Karash lifted the plasma cannon and fired. The blast tore through the wall behind James, but he was already moving. He closed the distance in seconds, ducked under the second shot, and drove his shoulder into Karash's center mass. The impact cracked ribs. Karash roared, swinging a clawed hand that slashed James across the cheek. Blood flew. James didn't react. They grappled, raw power against unrelenting force. Karash outweighed him threefold, but James moved like liquid steel, sliding, striking, driving his knee into soft tissue, his elbow into vital points. The fight was not elegant. It was brutal. It was real. At last, James drew his blade, a carbon-forged combat knife slick with soot, and drove it up beneath Karash's jaw. The alien's body spasmed, then dropped. James stood over him, chest heaving. He didn't say a word. There was nothing to say. Velkayar emerged moments later, her weapon raised but trembling. She looked at the human, the blade still gripped in his hand, and for the first time in her life, she lowered her weapon voluntarily. "What are you?" she asked. James didn't look at her. He turned, limping toward the exit. Before vanishing into the smoke, he paused. "Fear," he said without emotion, "is universal." And then he was gone. The sky above Vela 7 was clear for the first time in months. The toxic clouds had dispersed, the fires extinguished, and the once constant drone of conflict had fallen silent. From orbit, the colony looked dormant, scattered lights across a darkened terrain, like embers in the aftermath of a blaze. In the control room of Virex's judgment, silence hung heavy over the assembly of Empire commanders. Reports filtered in from recon drones, showing destroyed bunkers, evacuated outposts, and insurgents surrendering en masse. No one had issued orders for a ceasefire. They had simply stopped fighting. Archon Virex stood at the edge of the projection table, his tendrils still for once, watching footage recovered from the wreckage of Korash's command chamber. It was raw and fragmented, just flickers of the final confrontation, frames of the human's bloodied face, the fall of the rebel leader, the emptiness that followed. Yet even in pieces, it was unmistakable. Not a massacre, not a victory parade, just cold, precise resolution. He did this, Virex murmured, more to himself than anyone else. One man. Across the chamber, the Qatari general adjusted his cloak, his expression unreadable. The colony is stabilized. Infrastructure will take years to rebuild, but the rebellion is broken. And Earth? Someone asked. No one answered. Back on Earth, James Reeve walked alone through the rehabilitation wing of an off-grid medical facility buried deep within the Aleutian ice. His wounds had been treated, bones set, tissue regenerated. He bore the scars like old medals, not worn with pride, but accepted as fact. He refused ceremony. No medals, no parades. The mission had ended the moment he stepped off the evac drone. He stood before a window, watching the snow fall in quiet spirals. A nurse entered, datapad in hand, but hesitated when she saw him. "They're requesting you," she said softly. He didn't turn. "Who?" "Everyone." A faint trace of a smile ghosted his lips, then vanished. "They'll have to wait." In the outer systems, his legend spread faster than any ship. News feeds played dramatized simulations of his mission. Children carved makeshift knives into snow, and rebel cells in other systems began disbanding without conflict. Propaganda networks tried to twist the narrative, claiming advanced weaponry, cybernetic enhancement, even sorcery, but none of it erased the core truth. He had gone in alone and walked out alive. On the central world of the Kolari Dominion, a group of military strategists gathered in a subterranean war chamber. Holoscreens surrounded them, each displaying the same still image, a grainy silhouette emerging from smoke. They had analyzed the footage frame by frame, built models, dissected patterns. This operative, said a Varkari tactician, operated at a strategic, psychological, and kinetic level simultaneously. There was no pattern to exploit because he created no repetition. He did more than win, another added. He redefined the metric of individual combat effectiveness. No unit, no matter how elite, has achieved similar results in hostile alien terrain. He was not part of the unit. There was a pause. Then, in a tone that bordered on reverent awe, one of them whispered, "Navy SEAL." At the next summit of the Galactic Empires, the Great Chamber was more crowded than usual. News of the Velas 7 incident had drawn representatives who hadn't attended in decades. The usual posturing and theatrics were absent. The air was different, denser, more aware. Ambassador Elijah Rourke entered without fanfare, dressed in the same black suit. No weapons, no entourage. He walked to his podium and waited. The room quieted. Virex addressed him first. "Your operative has completed his mission. We acknowledge the effectiveness of Earth's contribution." Rourke raised an eyebrow. "Contribution? You mean the man you called a coward before he destroyed a separatist army alone?" There were no scoffs this time. No laughter. Only silence. Virex inclined his head slightly. It wasn't apology. It was recognition. Your people have demonstrated capabilities previously unknown to us. Capabilities? Rourke echoed, voice soft but pointed. That man was a fraction of what we're capable of. We didn't send a fleet. We didn't use orbital weapons. We didn't demand compensation. We sent one soldier. The Archon's tendrils shifted uneasily. Another delegate, a sworn diplomat with sleek carapace and nervous eyes, spoke up. May we ask, how many more do you have? Rourke paused, letting the question settle. Then, with the faintest trace of a smile, he replied, Enough. The statement rippled across the chamber, not as a threat, but a boundary. For centuries, the Galactic Empires had measured strength by scale. Fleets, armies, planets conquered. But Earth had shown them something else. Precision, patience, relentlessness. It wasn't the size of the force that mattered. It was the will behind it. In the following weeks, Earth's status was reclassified. No longer a non-aligned observation world, it was granted provisional tactical advisory rights. An unprecedented move. The language was bureaucratic, but the message was clear. Earth had earned a seat at the table not through diplomacy, but through undeniable action. James Reeve remained off-grid, refusing interviews and debriefings. He lived in silence, occasionally visiting unmarked graves or disappearing into the mountains for weeks at a time. EarthGov respected his boundaries. They knew what he had given. But in quiet moments, when threats rose in hushed tones and war drums sounded on the edge of known space, commanders still asked the same question in classified channels. Do we send another? The answer never changed. Only if we must. The myth of the human ghost became a strategic tool. His story was woven into warnings, into strategy briefings, into children's stories in places that once dismissed humanity as an afterthought. Alien warbands gave Earth a wider berth. Empire envoys approached negotiations with careful phrasing. And the name James Reeve was never spoken openly in those circles, not out of respect, but out of quiet, self-preserving fear. Because deep in the minds of generals and warlords, one fact burned hotter than plasma. If Earth sent just one man, what would happen if they ever sent more?